Greetings. Hello. Happy day to you. Hope you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength. And if you are not there, we sincerely hope that you are rapidly approaching that level of solid existence for your day today. We're glad that you're joining us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Thank you for joining us. Our very critical topic today: the lies designed to destroy Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. And this is a very interesting topic. We think you'll find these efforts to attack Dr. King are not new. They started during the early 1960s, and they've just seen a proliferation in the last several years, especially due to the usage of social media. And a lot of that is coming from the right. The right is articulating these attacks against Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and we'll talk about the reasons why, what that's about. They're even, you might have heard some of the refrains they're using, like Charlie Kirk is this generation's Martin Luther King, that kind of nonsense. So we're going to break that down today so that we can destroy those crazy myths and talk about Dr. King the way he deserves to be talked about, with the respect for the contribution that he made and certainly the sacrifice he made. And with yesterday, April 4th, being the 58th year since his assassination, it's appropriate that we reclaim Dr. King's legacy, especially those of us who are not necessarily aligned with Dr. King's vision and his work. I mean, that's certainly for us. I say it often, like there isn't probably 5% of what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King believed in and did, I agree with. But at the same time, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him and all of those people who participated in the nonviolent civil rights movement phase, because Dr. King operated, as we've talked about many times when we've talked about Dr. King, he operated always on a principle level. He was a man of principle, an honest man. And that's why it's so offensive to us that people who Dr. King had more principles, more honesty in the gas that he passed than these people criticizing him have in their entire existence. And the audacity of them to question him from that standpoint is just unacceptable. So, we have to stand up for and tell the truth about the people who stood up for us. And so that's what this program today is designed to do. We give honor and respect to the native peoples of the Western Hemisphere, the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. These are their lands. No matter what happens, they always have been their lands. They always will be. And we are with solidarity with them in fighting to get their lands back. And we give honor and respect to our African ancestors who are the reason that we are here. They are the people that we give credit for our ability to be here. They were the ones who stood up against the harsh conditions we faced. And so we thank them for their service. We don't thank anyone else. Going to war to fight for corporations in another country has done absolutely nothing to provide rights for me. So I'm sorry, but I'm not going to join that train because it doesn't make any sense to me. But I will give thanks for the service of the people like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who sacrificed their lives so that the barriers that were in front of us could be removed. So we give honor to all of them, him, of course, being one of them. And of course, we always start with just our brief introduction for those that don't know who we are. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan African political party that is based in Africa. We are not based in California or Michigan or Florida or New York or London, England, or Paris, France, or any of these places. We are based in the national home for people of African descent, Africa. And that does not mean that you have to travel to it doesn't even mean it doesn't mean you have to live there. It doesn't even mean you have to travel there, although you should travel there. But what it does mean is that philosophically and psychologically, it's important that we recognize the role that Africa should play in our life, because whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, as Africa goes, that's where we're going. And the reason why we know this beyond the shadow of a doubt is because the wealth that built up this Western empire that we live in is the result of exploiting Africa. And for those of you who are in the Sacramento area, you come to our report back event tomorrow night here about our trip to Azania, South Africa in January. We'll talk about that, what I just said, in great detail. But we have plenty of workshops we've done where we talked about that. So that's why we say the objective we're fighting for is Pan Africanism. Pan Africanism. All of Africa. That's what that means. And it's defined, as I just alluded to one united socialist Africa. And we understand that socialism is a scary word for people that don't understand it. But the only thing we would say about that, because we've again given many workshops defining what it is. So you should go back and look for them if you're interested in that. But what we will say right now is that we understand beyond a shadow of a doubt that the transatlantic slave trade financed the Industrial Revolution, which developed the dawn of the capitalist system. So if you understand that, there's absolutely no way in hell that we would ever think that capitalism is the solution to the problems. It's the reason why we're in the situation we're in today. So it can never be the solution. So that's what we want to do. That's the work that we do. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is a strategic work that's outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. If you're looking at a screen, and hopefully you are, the cover of that book is displayed there. And he talks about in that book the need for us to unite all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground throughout Africa. So a lot of the work that I did in Africa in January, just like the work that I do every time I go to Africa, is designed to contribute to that work. And again, if you're local, we'll be talking about that in great detail tomorrow night. Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by APRP organizers myself, Ajamu, and my ideological and biological daughter, Shakura, who is now Dr. Shakura. So, to get us started on this topic tonight of the lies designed to discredit the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Baba Jamu. Greetings, everyone. What's going on? Good to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here. Let's jump right in and talk about the capitalist system and its flunkies because they don't choose our martyrs. We should not allow them to have that choice and privilege. I want to start by acknowledging that when we think about the different scores of reactionary politicians and social media gifters, how they have facilitated this quote unquote movement really to discredit the legitimate legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. We need to think further into understanding how today we will discuss their tactics here. And what's important to note up front is that Asada Shakur was 100% correct when she said that not only insane people look to their enemies for their direction. Excuse me, I said not only, but that only insane people look to their enemies for direction. And just to kind of break this down and to give us a little bit more thought into it. I was privileged to be in my work study circle yesterday, and a lot of the questions that were brought up in the ideological discussion and in World Geo had a lot to do with this concept of taking folks who have resisted and sacrificed their lives and then propaganda finding ways to tilt their credibility and to adjust their outcome and to make their pathway look more evil or look more opportunistic than what it really was. And to which I would say, even in recent weeks, I've had conversations where I've met folks who have descended from the island of Cuba, and I just asked them, like, what was your take on the socialist revolution, because I'm trying to get an understanding, especially considering as how I just went there and visited for myself. And I think that it's just important for us to continue to be open to having these conversations, especially if we identify as organizers. And we never want to take on the role, especially as party members, that we know everything and that we have all the information. Even though I do believe what we say about joining an organization that's working for justice. And I also believe that 9 times out of 10, people who are not organizing and who don't understand that political education is key are not going to have as much information as I do. Simultaneity, thank you, Vince Ramos Brigade, one of the community agreements. Simultaneity also teaches me that more than one thing can be true at one time. So it is possible for me to be a party member and to understand that I have access to more information and knowledge than a lot of people do, while at the same time understanding that the precise intention of the party is to recruit people who we have not already convinced are understanding that there is something that needs to be done. We don't need to convince the people who are listening on this seminar right now. We love you and we appreciate you, but you're not our target audience, because all of you are here because you understand that there are massive problems in this world and humanity deserves better. Plants and animals deserve better. Any living organism deserves better than what capitalism has given us. So we're not necessarily targeting you all because you already know that, right? You all are doing the work, or hopefully you're going to start doing the work so that we can get some more ground covered. What we're trying to focus on is how do we reach those people that see our shorts? How do we reach those people that see our videos? How do we reach those people and they swipe left or they scroll left or they don't even take the time to listen to it, right? And I think that's the question that we all have to ask ourselves at the end of the day. So we say that to say that when you talk to people who have descended from Cuba and they tell you what they believe the propaganda to be, that socialism doesn't work, as Baba Ajamu just pointed out. Or I had a conversation this past weekend with a young man, and I was just talking to him just in general, and he said, well, this country, we deserve a better president. And I was like, well, I don't identify as we because I'm not American. Like just having these kind of conversations, right? Like I really truly believe that this is what Dr. King was trying to get us to. And a lot of people really don't know how in depth he started to get with developing his own Pan Africanist ideology. And unfortunately, he was murdered before he could really progress it to the point that he wanted it to be. But I remind you again, especially if you missed it when I gave my 3 report backs, or if you just didn't happen to listen to any of the report backs that I gave. When we think about why people are attacking Dr. King's legacy, you should also remember that he had a lot to do with changing the course of how the world was shaped. And because of that, now his credibility is up for grabs. To which I would ask you, if the system that is designed to be inhumane is trying to convince you that Dr. King was a horrible person, then if we know that the system can't be trusted, that means the opposite is also true. So then I ask you, why is there a statue of Dr. King in downtown Havana right now? Why would the Cuban people, who are limited on resources, limited on cement, limited on marble, limited on getting these kind of resources shipped to their island, why would they take the time to invest money in building a statue that not only reflects Dr. Martin Luther King, but also reflects Malcolm X? If these people were such bad people, to which I say to you, this is why you cannot trust the capitalist propaganda. And the sooner you all figure that out, the better we will all be. You should just automatically assume that you need to cross check it, because 9 times out of 10, there is something in there that has converted to a lie, and therefore it is not completely and all the way true. And I'll pull from Kwame Ture's quote where he said, if you're trying to address the US with a sense of consciousness, you're not going to be able to do that correctly because America has no consciousness. So you can't really come into this space thinking, well, there might be some truth to it. Why? They've never proven to you that they can be truthful before. Why would they be truthful now? And again, I ask you, if the same propaganda is teaching you that Dr. King is now suddenly this bad person, then why would Cuba invest all the time and money to build a statue in honor of his name? You should just ask yourself that. And you should go back and listen to my report backs, because I'm sure I had a picture of it somewhere so you can see it for yourself. I just want to highlight the photo that we have here on the image, and also point out that the slander against Dr. King started 60 years ago when the FBI director J. Edgar Hoover labeled King as, quote, a notorious liar, end quote, while launching an illegal and immoral campaign to discredit King's character as a strategy to discredit King's political work. Next slide, please. And of course, we can see that unfortunately that 60 years has continued, especially with people who have access to, enhancing that lie and embedded in, truth and whatnot, especially as it relates to the social media that we have today. So with that, I will turn it back over to Baba Ajamu.
All right. Obrigada, Santisana, Midasi. Thank you very much. And so we're going to talk about, just get into this character assassination that started with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, J. Edgar Hoover, in the early to mid 1960s. 1963 is when we can pinpoint when this really started. And again, we quote Kwame Ture when he said, capitalism makes things strange seem normal, and things normal seem strange. Capitalism makes things strange seem normal, and things normal seem strange. And I'll give the example I gave when I was speaking at a high school once. And I made that statement, and they didn't understand what I meant. And so I told them, you all have a quad out here. I walked through it to get to this classroom, to this auditorium we're in. And I think I would assume you have events out there. And they were like, yeah, we always have stuff out there, performances or whatever. I'm like, okay, so think about your quad for a second. Capitalism makes things strange seem normal, and things normal seem strange. So if someone was out there on the stage on your quad, this is what I told them, and they had a sound system, and they were saying, we need to build an organization to eradicate poverty, to eradicate houselessness, to ensure that people were educated so we could eradicate white supremacy and patriarchy and all of these things. I told them 90% of you would walk by this person or people talking like you didn't see or hear them. You would just walk right by the stage like you didn't even see or hear them. And they giggled. And I said, and the reason why you would do that is because capitalism makes things normal seem strange. So the fact that someone or somebody, some people are up there talking about how we need to get together and create a better world, asking you to do things, you would interpret that as strange, most of you. And you'd be like, I don't want to do that. That's crazy. I'm not trying to do how are we going to eradicate poverty? You even though that's a perfectly logical thing for someone to make a call to action for, capitalism makes everything normal seem strange. I said, by the same token, if the same sound system was out there on the quad, the same people in the audience, but somebody was up there doing music, doing hip hop, for example, and they were calling all the women B's and H's. They were calling all of our people the N word, and they were doing that consistently. A lot of you all would run to the stage and join them and be enthusiastic about participating in their performance. And they laughed out loud at that one. And I said, because capitalism makes things strange seem normal. It should be strange that this music denigrates us as a people, because that's exactly what it does. And I heard more of it than 99.9% of you. So there's nothing you could tell me about, what the music was about. And we've done plenty of work with some of the more conscious hip hop artists, and they've given us a thorough analysis of how the industry works. So we're prepared to talk to anybody about that. But we know that the music denigrates us, but yet that's been normalized. So the fact that, even the N word, the fact that that's kind of normalized, like people will even argue with you, like there's nothing wrong with using it. When I always ask people, give me an example of where using that word has helped us to aspire to higher heights. Where does that happen? Where it's improved our ability to communicate with one another by consistently referring to each other that way. Where is that example where that's happened? Where it's permitted us to be able to develop higher level problem solving skills with one another in our communities using that word. Show me where, well, these people here, they build an organization based on the philosophy of using that word, and they know how to communicate effect. They don't have any problems. There's no crime in the community they live in. There's no problems. There's no divorces. There's no domestic violence. None of that. There's no drug abuse, alcoholism, because they built this entire structure around using that reactionary word. Show me that. And none of you can do that because it doesn't exist. Whereas I can show you where the word, because people say, well, it's just a word, but I can show you where the word, being a tool of the system of oppression, has been used consistently to convince us that we're less than human, that there's something wrong with us, because that's the whole purpose of it. That's why they called us that in the first place. And that's the reason why we took it. And now we call each other that because on some level, we believe that we're less than them. Whether we admit it or not is irrelevant. I know the truth. We believe that we're less than them. And so that's why we do that, because no self-respecting people with dignity would do that. You could go out here right now and you could call people the N word, and a lot of people wouldn't even flinch if you did that. Whereas if you call them an African, they'd be ready to argue against you. That right there, you cannot refute it, tells you how insane we are. And it tells you what's been done to us. Just what I just said clearly articulates that. So, this is the reality of what this statement that Kwame made says. And Dr. King, of course, was a Baptist minister. He became the face of the civil rights movement for justice in this backward country in the 1960s. And a clear analysis of all this has to include that this was the logical position for a leader of faith to be in, right? It's logical that the person who says, and this is especially appropriate on Easter Day. This is the day that's supposed to symbolize the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who was crucified for what? Because he stood up for the dispossessed. Isn't that why he was crucified? He stood up, he challenged the Roman Empire. We've studied the Bible, so we know. I'm not relying on some chicken foot pastor, Reverend Pig's Feet, to tell me about I know it. So he stood up against the Rome. He was not a citizen of Rome. He stood up against the Roman Empire. He stood up to fight these people who were advancing the oppression of the masses of people, and this is why they crucified the man. So this today is supposed to represent, if you believe it, that he was resurrected as the Son of God and became, Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior, right? So, of course, any person that says that they represent a man that would give up his life to fight for justice, it's logical that that person would be someone who would be in the forefront of the fight in this society to fight for justice, right? But at the same time, again, capitalism makes things that should be normal seem strange, and things that should be strange seem normal. It should be strange that most of these ministers out here today are multimillionaires. They're talking about you put your faith in my building, in my institution, and that's how you go to heaven. So they're lying to people, because that's damn sure not true. And that has been so normalized that people think that that's the way preachers are supposed to be. The concept of someone doing what Dr. King said, forsaking personal comfort for the reality of fighting for justice, that's almost a non-existent today. There are a few that do that, but churches are big organizations. You have these big church organizations today, and they don't get involved in issues. You need no name one of these big mega churches. Name one of these big mega preachers, TD Jakes, or what's his name in LA? I can't even remember his name right now. I want to say Pastor Coon, but whatever his damn name, Fred Price, or any of these people. Show me where any of these people stood up and spoke out against police killing our people, stood up and spoke out against the issues in our community that are holding us back, domestic violence, and organized their institution to do something about it. Show me any of these mass church preachers that did that. Godot here in Sacramento, where I am. Show me where that's happened. It hasn't had. You can get mad if you support these pimps, but you can't refute that they haven't done that. They don't have a program to do any of that. They have these huge church organizations, Foursquare Ministries, the Church of God in Christ, all of these national organizations where they have legal counsel on retainer, and they're all about doing everything they can to increase their revenues, not to confront injustice. They don't stand up, and a lot of these African churches I'm talking about, they support the Republican Party. You know, all them Negro pastors went and met with Trump. That's not me making that up. They did that. A lot of these people I'm talking about right now, they did that. And if they didn't do it, you know, they stood silent. They didn't come out and criticize. You haven't heard a peep from TD Jakes talking about injustice in this society. You haven't heard. I'm talking about real talk. I ain't talking about no poot butt talk. I'm talking about the slave trade made America rich, talking about we have no responsibility to support America's imperialist wars abroad. You ain't seen none of these people talking like that, and you never will. You never will. They don't have the character the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King had. So that's what we're talking about here, right? And so, this is the reason why these efforts exist to paint Dr. King as immoral, to paint him as disingenuous, to talk about he was not somebody who was honorable enough to deserve our respect. That's why these attacks are coming against Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. That's why they started in the 60s, and that's why they're even more prominently pronounced today. And the thing that makes me angry about that is Dr. King, even though I didn't agree with Dr. King, I've been very transparent about that for decades. But he possessed more morality in his pinky than all these people criticizing him combined. He possessed more morality in his gas that came out of his ass than these people possess today in their entirety. And like the picture says, unlike his critics, Dr. King had the courage. He's there at the FBI office there. He went to confront J. Edgar Hoover about this campaign of lies they were engaged in to discredit him. He had the courage to go there and do that. He knew that the FBI was trying to destroy him. He didn't. This was a man of God. You say you believe in God. If you believe in God, how the hell are you going to be afraid of the U.S. government? If that's the case, then you don't believe in God. Your God is the U.S. government. That's your God. Okay, I don't even believe in organized religion, but I can tell you right now, I'm not afraid of no goddamn U.S. government. They're not going to stop me from standing up against injustice. I've been visited 3 times by federal police agencies in my life. 3 times they've came to attempt to intimidate me, and I've told them each time, I don't negotiate with terrorists. Well, what does that mean? That means I don't talk to you because you're a terrorist to me. So I don't talk to you. I don't negotiate with terrorists. I have nothing to say to you. I can get a lawyer, and the lawyer can talk to you, but I have nothing to say to you. And that'll always be the case. So it's difficult for me, based on my history, to respect people who, I believe in God, and you don't do a damn thing for anybody except yourself. You should be more like Dr. King, who was certainly more like Jesus. This is the weekend commemorating Jesus being crucified. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was crucified, God damn it. So if you want to be like Jesus, you got to be like that. You got to be willing to stand up and risk everything to do the right thing. How many of us are going to be that person? That's the question. So we're going to talk about, what exactly is this campaign about? And when I talk about King, and I said this a million times, and I'll say it a million more. When I talk about King was a man of principle, and this is the reason why I respect him, right? He's speaking in this picture in Philadelphia, Mississippi. I tell this story. I'm going to continue to tell it because it's worth telling. In Philadelphia, Mississippi, in June of 1966, this was during the March Against Fear, the Black Power March, where Kwame and them came out with the Black Power slogan. It was that march. Now, if you've studied these marches, like if you don't study them, you think They started in Memphis, Tennessee, and they marched all the way to Jackson, Mississippi, and they just that was a whole march. It took 4 or 5 days, and that's not how the marches worked, you all. The way they worked is they would march 2 or 3 hours a day. This is sweltering heat. This is the Mississippi Delta. So they marched a couple hours a day, and then they would stop until the next day, sometimes a couple of days later, before they picked up the march again. And these folks who were in leadership positions, like Dr. King, they would leave the march when it stopped, and they would continue doing other work. That's what they would do. They wouldn't just stay with the people in the march the whole time. So this was during the March Against Fear, June of 1966. And Dr. King, and you see Abernathy behind him and some other people, they went to Philadelphia, Mississippi. And Philadelphia, Mississippi is the small town of about 6,000 people where the three civil rights workers were viciously murdered by the sheriff's department and the Ku Klux Klan. They were all the same. They were all the same there in 1964 when that happened, and they're all the same today. And they did that. And this is what happened. And so Dr. King and these other folks went there to have a rally to commemorate, because it was in June of 1964, 2 years before this picture, when these three civil rights workers, Andrew Goodman from the Congress of Racial Equality, Michael Schwerner from the Congress of Racial Equality, the two European young students who participated in the civil rights movement down there, and James Chaney, the African, who was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. I've mentioned many times they had a coalition of organizations. They didn't have enough people because, again, a lot of you haven't studied. You think that, well, the civil rights movement was hundreds of thousands. It was never that. It's never been that. Stop saying we had unity in the 60s. That's a damn lie. We had the same thing in the 60s we have today. We have a few people that are doing their best to sacrifice and make a contribution to make this world better. And the majority of people are not even paying any attention to them. That's the same way it was in the 60s. You don't believe me? Read John Lewis's autobiography. He talked about being at Morehouse and being out on the quad. And I've read it. You should read. I don't even trust or believe in John Lewis, but I don't deny that he was a significant figure in the civil rights movement. He was a chairperson for SNCC, and he went out there and made his contribution. They beat him senseless at the Selma Bridge protest in 1965 in Alabama. He deserves respect for that. Rest in power. Even though I didn't agree with him. I think it was the best thing that happened for our movement when Kwame Ture, who was Stokely Carmichael, then defeated John Lewis to become chairperson of SNCC. That moved SNCC in a militant direction. But John Lewis talked about in his autobiography that he was at Morehouse and he was talking in the quad, trying to encourage the African students at Morehouse to get involved in the civil rights movement. And he said Omega Psi Phi, the fraternity, they came through on a line. And if you went to college, you know what I'm talking about. They came through chanting and doing all the coon stuff that's stepping, all the coon stuff that they do, and they interrupted his speech. And he talked about how surreal it was because this was a man who had been in the depths of terror in the South. And here he came here to try to tell our young people, we need you to come and participate. And they stopped listening to him to watch that foolishness. So stop believing this myth that everybody was conscious in the 60s and everybody was involved in the movement. We wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now if that was true. That's just fantasy. That was never true. So Dr. King, they left, they went to Philadelphia, and he's giving this speech in this picture. And they're surrounded by the white community in Philadelphia, Mississippi. In this picture, go Google this picture and study it. There were about 20 of them, and there were about 300 racist white crackers surrounding them. And Dr. King said, I know that the people that murdered Goodman, Schwerner, and Chaney are close by. And the white people laughed and said, we're right behind you. And they still did their speech there. They didn't have any security. They didn't have anything there. It was just them. That is only a person of principle that can do that. I wouldn't be able to do that unless I was heavily armed. I'd do it if I was heavily armed. but I wouldn't be able to do it the way Dr. King did it. I have to respect that. Even though I don't understand it, I have to respect it because that tells me that this man is 100% committed to his philosophy of nonviolence, even though it makes absolutely no sense to me. If you hit me, I'm going to knock the hell out of you. I'm telling you right now, because a lot of white supremacists and fascists listen to this show. So I'm telling you, don't confuse me with Dr. King. You come after me, you got one shot. Hey, you don't make it with that, you might get me. But if you miss with that shot, it's going down on you. The same way you intended for me. That's just what I believe. I am 100% committed to that philosophy. So I don't understand that, but I respect it. And that's what he did. That's only a person of principle who could do that. During this speech, King was surrounded by violent white supremacists, most likely some of those responsible for the heinous murders. His willingness to place himself in this type of danger illustrates the courage and integrity Dr. King displayed on a consistent basis. And I understand this on a different level because in 2014, Shakur is on here. She can stop me if I'm lying. She and I went to Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee is just like 2 hours from where this picture took place because Memphis is on the southern edge of Tennessee and it borders the state of Mississippi. So every year I would ask Shakur, I'd go to visit her at, she was at Tuskegee at first and then at the University of Memphis. What do you want to do for your birthday? Her birthday is coming up in a couple of weeks. And she always knew that I would always want to pay tribute to the people that, that we should give thanks for their service. And so we decided we would drive the route of this March Against Fear and that we would veer off like Dr. King did and go to Philadelphia, Mississippi. So we did that in June of 2014, 50 years after the three civil rights workers were murdered in that town. It's still a small town, only about 6,000 people. And the interesting thing that we saw about it is that there are very few Africans there, which is strange because Mississippi is the only state in this country where we're basically half of the population. We don't have numbers that high in other than Maryland would be about the only other state because of gentrification running us out of DC, where that's in that vicinity. And Mississippi, the whole state is like that. So that's what happened there. And we walked down Main Street and Shakur, there's a picture on my website. Shakur had on a African dress of some sort. I can't remember. It's on there. If you look at the picture, I had on. I know because I look at the picture, so I remember. I had on a Black Panther Party shirt and a ball cap that said African on it. And we're walking down the street and we're laughing. People were taking pictures of us because we clearly did not fit in. And we were down there. We went to a restaurant and we walked in there and we were laughing and joking, and the people were looking at us like, "What the hell?" And the young woman who the white man, I guess he was the owner because he was standing there glaring at us. And we were glaring at him and laughing at him. And the young African woman came over and she was talking to us about our order, and she told her, y'all ain't from here. And Shakura thinking that she's getting ready to move there to go to school, and to us it's all the same, Memphis, Philadelphia, Mississippi, whatever. So she said, no, I'm about to move here. And the young woman thought she meant move to that town. So oh, you sure you want to do that? Like, and she was serious too, like, you know in the tension in the air. 50 years later, I can only imagine what it was in 1964. If it was that tense in 2014, and because of the work that these people did, we built on that. Because we walked around that town fully armed. I'm just telling you the goddamn truth, fully armed. Any crackers mess with us, they better have had good life insurance. And we got out. There was a plantation house. We got out and looked at it. The white woman came out of her house and we laughed. She didn't say nothing to us, but if she had, I would have told her what I always would tell them, like, yeah, we trying to do research, see if you owe us money. This might be our people that worked on this property. So let's talk about the attacks being waged against Dr. King. The basis of what this program today is about, right? These attacks are rooted in efforts by the enemies of humanity to humanize racists and terrorists, right? Like Columbus, Washington, Jefferson, Charlie Kirk, etc., to normalize these people and make these people seem as if they've contributed to society, when they're basically terrorists, thugs, and criminals, to make it seem like that. And that's the whole part of that. So the way that they want to do that is to raise questions about people like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, right? So their tactic is to shine a bright light on they can find that can be used to discredit him. And there are two things that they focus on to do that today. And they did it in the 60s. The two things that they're focused on are number one, these alleged affairs that Dr. King had on his wife, Coretta Scott King. The uh, narrative is that he slept with a bunch of women, right? So they're constantly raising that up because their point is that if he did that and he was a Baptist minister, he did not it was not warranted to give him the respect of a moral leader, to question the morality of this country when, in their words, he didn't have morality. That's their first attempt. Their second attack is to say that he was a communist, right? As if that would be a bad thing. But for a lot of people in this country, it is a bad thing. It's a bad thing for the capitalists because they know that people developing a socialist consciousness means their days are numbered. So that's why they don't like it. The only reason why it's a bad thing for working people of any nationality is because they don't understand it. And as long as they can keep us from understanding, and that's proven very simply, because you can find anybody and you can generate a discussion about socialism and they're going to have an opinion on it. I guarantee you, I bet you money. You can go to anybody and you could say, yeah, I think it's important. Like Cuba is a socialist country and they've done this and that with their socialist system, and they're going to argue with you. And it doesn't matter that they've never read a single book about socialism. It doesn't matter that they've never traveled to a socialist country. It doesn't matter that they've never studied it. They're still going to have an opinion even though they don't know where they got their opinion from. We know where they got it from, but they don't know where they're still going to have one. And it doesn't matter that you could have studied Cuba intensely. Like I'll say this with full confidence, it's not a whole lot of people. It's not a whole lot of people in this country who have studied Cuba more than I have over the last 3.5 decades. There are not a whole lot of people who have written more about Cuba's socialist system. There are not a whole lot of people who have been there like I have. There are not, but then that never stops anybody from arguing with me. Never. They always have an argument. So that's how this system works. Ignorance is a flex here in this society. So that's the thing. So they're using that boogie word of communism and they're trying to tie Dr. King to it. So, you have to understand where all this comes from. And I mentioned J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI started all this nonsense. They started it in the early 60s by developing a file because they wanted to use these so-called adulterous encounters to justify discrediting Dr. King. So they would go to the hotels he was scheduled to stay in. They would make arrangements with the hotel operators and they would hide tape recorders under his bed. And so that's what they said they had were tape recordings of these encounters he had with women. And they prepared a file based on these tape recordings that they had, right? And that's how they did that. The communist accusation was because he had advisors around him, two of them, and in particular, Bayard Rustin, who was really the architect of the nonviolent civil disobedience direct action approach, and Stanley Levison, who was a European, who was also an advisor. Now, Bayard Rustin had flirted with people on the far left, if you will, people who were involved in the Communist Party, Socialist parties. It's not clear if he was ever a member. Some people say he was, some people say he wasn't, but he certainly was in the proximity of people there were, which if you do movement work, that's not because when you do movement work, you have socialists, you have anarchists, you have liberals in the Democratic, we have all kind of people. So just saying someone's in the vicinity, I'm always around all kind of people like that. But I'm not a liberal. I'm not in the Democrat. I'm not a member of the. I shoot myself in the head before I be a member of the Democratic Party. But I'm around people that are. I'm around people that are anarchists. I'm not an anarchist, but I'm around people all the time that are, because when you do work for justice, you're not like, oh, you have to be my thinking for me to work with you. If you got any good sense, you're going to work with whoever is trying to create a reality of justice. So Stanley Levison did have at one time a membership in Communist Party USA, but he had long since left that it was a good 20 years, I believe, before the civil rights movement. But this is what they used to try to discredit Dr. King. And, as bad as the word communism is today, it was much more of a boogie word then, because you had the Cold War. The first world against the second world, the U.S. leading the capitalist world against the Soviet Union, leading the so-called socialist world of the Eastern Bloc countries in Europe. So that was what was going on then. So there was all this anti-communist propaganda. Y'all, if you're of age during that period, you experienced it even if you were not conscious of it. Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon. Who were the villains in there? Boris and Natasha, Russian agents. Get Smart. Who were the villains in there? Russia. That was the propaganda, right? And so that you watch those shows, it seeps in on you even if you're not aware of it, right? Now they don't use them anymore because the Soviet Union doesn't exist. Now they have, Arabs are the terrorists, so-called terrorists. And African people have always been the villains. So, that's what they do to propagandize you. They want you to think that African men are the most violent animals on earth. So that's how we're constantly portrayed, consistently and constantly. As if white men are not the most violent people in human history. That's not anti-white men. I know plenty of wonderful white men, but there's no question. All you got to do is look at who are the majority of the serial killers, who are the majority of the mass shooters, who are the majority of the domestic abusers, who are the majority of the people. Like, what gun manufacturing companies do African people own, that indigenous people own? What gun manufacturers? What weapons manufacturers companies do we own? We don't own any of that shit. So how the hell are you gonna say we're the most violent people? Even when we use the guns, we couldn't even have them if we don't own. We don't. How can we get blamed for the drugs and all? We don't own a canoe. Most of us are too afraid to get in water if it's more than 4 feet deep. So how the hell if these drugs come from on the boats? We don't have anything to do with that. We didn't do that. We scared to get in water that's 4 feet or more. We don't own a boat. We don't even go out on boats because that first boat ride that brought us the hell over here, we're still traumatized by that one. Most of us won't even get on a damn boat. And if we do, we're all nervous. So we ain't the ones doing that. We didn't produce no weapons. We don't control any of that. But that's the propaganda that they have you convinced about. You ain't even thought of it the way I just articulated. But that's the propaganda, how that works. So this is what they're doing with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. They did it in the 60s, and it's evolved now in 2026 because they're talking about these affairs and they're talking about, like this takes away his credibility. And they're talking about he was a communist, so he couldn't be for America. So this is why these people that they are claiming are pro-America, like this Charlie Kirk fascist, they deserve the respect that instead of giving it to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. That's their argument. And they have recruited plenty of graham cracker coons on social media to parrot and vomit out this misinformation. So that's why it's important that we understand it and understand it in clear terms, right? What it is, what it's about, right? What it's about with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And that's the last part that we want to talk about, right? Dr. King's integrity was unquestionable. Unquestionable. And I'll say this. I don't know if Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was having affairs with women or sleeping with other men. And I've studied it intensely, and I have to say that the evidence that he was is overwhelming, right? So, just for the sake of argument, let's say that he was doing that. And I'll say this: that's to me, that's not a question of his morality. I mean, you could say that he shouldn't have done it. I'll say it. It's something he should not have done. But at the same time, I have a small level of understanding of the pressure and the stress that is involved with you trying to stand up against this system. I don't understand it anywhere to the level that he had to deal with it, but I understand it because I am exposed to that. And because I understand it on that level, I just don't feel like I'm qualified to judge him if he was having affairs because the amount of pressure this man had, and I'm certainly not going to let people judge him who haven't lifted a finger to do anything to advance our people's cause because it's easy for you to stand there in judgment because you don't take any risks. So that's my position on that. And I don't think that I'm the only person that sees it that way. I think that Coretta Scott King saw it that way because that woman never spoke out, never spoke to these allegations. And I have a ton of respect for her for that reason because I know that J. Edgar Hoover created that file that I mentioned earlier, and they sealed the file. And in 1982, 83, Ronald Reagan, that damn cracker, that devil, when the King holiday, people were protesting. I was on the streets. We were getting attacked by police protesting for the King holiday. And it became evident to these crackers and their graham cracker flunkies that it was going to just be a matter of time before pressure was built up enough so that the King holiday, they would have to submit to that. And so that devil Reagan wanted to release the file. Now, the history of this FBI file is that the FBI leaked it in the 60s. They sent it to Rolling Stone magazine and they sent it to Coretta Scott King, the wife of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Rolling Stone, respect to them, they refused to publish it. They didn't do anything with it. They never did do anything with it. Respect to them for that. Coretta Scott King never did anything with it. Respect to her for that. She never made a public comment about it because she understood and I can only imagine the pain that the allegations caused her. And we don't know. She probably, I'm sure, had a discussion with her husband, and it was decided, she came to understand that maybe it was true. She still understood that to come out like and to talk about it and to criticize him would have discredited him, but it would have done much more to discredit the movement. And she understood that's what they were trying to do. And that's why I believe she never spoke about it. And that's why she deserves our respect. Because a lot of you today, if you were in the same position as her, you couldn't wait to get to Instagram and start talking about it and criticizing him. You wouldn't give a damn about what impact it had on the movement. All you could think about is your hurt ego and your hurt self, and you wouldn't give a damn about that. She had the integrity not to do that, and that's why I respect her. And we can learn from that. We need to learn from that because a lot of you all will jump on social media and criticize somebody, and you're just doing police work. You're so goddamn stupid. You're not even smart enough to get paid by the police to do work to sabotage them. You do it for free. You do it for free without any. They love you. They don't even have to talk to you. They can't even stand you, and you still do their work for them. And you don't have the courage, if you have a problem with somebody, to go to them and take it to them. And you want to come to me and make all these. I don't want to hear that shit. Stop giving me all those backward ass excuses. You're just not mature enough to do the work the way it needs to be done. I don't give a damn who you are. I'm saying it to you. I don't. It's so many of you. I can't. If I knew, I could name you. But there's so many of you. I can't do that. I wouldn't name you this way. I would say it to your face. You shouldn't do that. And I've said it to these people. But you can't listen to that because your ego is hurt and all this nonsense that's more important than your commitment to making a serious contribution to our movement. So respect to Coretta Scott King for doing that. Nobody can deny Dr. King's integrity. Nobody can deny that. And yet our enemies have convinced some of us who refuse to study anything more important than flatulence that affairs by Dr. King, a commitment towards Africa's liberation over micro-nationalist concerns by Kwame Nkrumah, The willingness to kill those who would kill you by Malcolm, Che Guevara, Sekou Touré, etc., equals a lack of morality, while the accusers demonstrate soulless actions in everything that they do. They're the ones who lack morality. The Republican Party lacks morality. The Democratic Party lacks morality. The U.S. Supreme Court lacks morality. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization lacks morality. Britain lacks morality. France lacks morality. Portugal lacks morality. Canada lacks morality. Certainly, the Zionist state of Israel lacks morality. Australia lacks morality. All of these entities are the most soulless, moralist entities in human history. This country has killed more people than any entity in human history. For what? For what? Stop all this weak need nonsense. Well, Iran, that's a bad regime. You don't know a damn thing about Iran. You don't know anything about their country. You know nothing about their faith. You know nothing about their government. You just know it's different than you. And in your eyes, that means it's bad because it's not the way you do things. Like this country is anything to look at and say, well, that's the proper way to manage people's lives. Like you are not in the moral position to question how anybody lives their lives. I don't care where. I don't agree. I don't believe in any normalized religion. I don't want to live in any society that's based on any religion, any of the religions. I don't want any of your damn religions. I don't care. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, I don't want any of it. Okay, but you are not in a position to criticize another society just because it's different than this backward ass moralist society that we live in here. Let's just establish that and make that clear right now. Dr. King was a soldier for morality, and we are going to stand up and defend his dignity. And I don't understand why all these Christian ministers don't have the backbone to do it. They're supposed to be having the same sense of faith that he have. They should have the morality to do it. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a minister. I'm not a student of nonviolence. I'm none of that. I just recognize the integrity and the dignity that Dr. King had and that he gave to me. And for that reason, I'll defend him for as long as I live. No good deed goes unpunished. If we don't defend those who fight for us, who the hell else is going to do it? Who's going to do it? That's the reality. Some of us are so cowardly that we'll let them disparage Dr. King because we just don't want to do the work to understand how to stand up and represent what's right. But we're going to do that. Dr. King was our soldier. We don't need a bunch of crackers and graham cracker flunkies talking about this, talking about him. Charlie Kirk couldn't wipe Dr. King's asshole. That's just the reality of the situation. Was not qualified to wipe his. Charlie Kirk wasn't qualified to wipe my asshole. Shit, that's just the reality. I don't give a damn about him being dead. He should be dead. Shit, anybody that stands up against the rights of people to exist should be dead. God damn it, that's the truth. And I could die tonight. I still wouldn't. I still wouldn't backtrack on that statement. It's an absolute statement because I'm not afraid to say what needs to be said. So that's just the reality of it. He should be dead. I'm not saying, oh, you can't, it's wrong. People run around, it's wrong. He shouldn't have been dead. I mean, hey, some people need to die, right? And you stand there and say that, and then you'll defend the U.S. military that's out here killing people. Who are you fooling? The only difference between me and you is I'm not a hypocrite. I admit it. These people are our enemies. They're trying to kill me. If I'm gonna try to get them before they get me. We love Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and we respect his contribution. We want to ask you to join us next week, April 12th. We're going to give you an update on neo-colonial sabotage in Guinea-Bissau. We did a workshop on that a few weeks ago. This is, again, a situation where the people's will, you want to understand what's going on in Africa, the people's will is being subverted in the interests of international capital and neo-colonialism in Guinea-Bissau is an example of that. So join us, learn something about Africa. It'll be a good thing for you to do. The red and white QR code in the upper left-hand corner, scan that and you can get information on this program and other AAPRP programs. You can also go to our Forward Ever shop and purchase clothing. Don't just purchase one thing, purchase gifts for people. and give them to them. Clothing that has revolutionary slogans on it. This is how we finance our work in Africa. So we ask you to do that. The Hood Communist blog, you can find that there. Authors, wonderful revolutionary African authors. I'm one of them. That writes there regularly. And if you're in Sacramento, every Thursday we have community self defense. We invite you to come out. We're starting to really focus on how to keep yourself from getting punched and kicked, as well as the offensive moves, as well as exercising your minds. We watched the video on childbirth Thursday, why women in the West are forced to give birth on their backs and how that's the worst way for them to do it, but it's a convenient way for the doctors to view the process, the mostly male doctors, and that's where that process came from. So that's what we do at Community Defense every Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. at 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Cottage Way, Unit 15. So come out, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 6 to 8 p.m. And then we also want to invite you on tomorrow night, if you're in Sacramento, to report back on our trip to Azania, South Africa, the organizing trip portion of it. Tomorrow, we're going to give a presentation. We'll have snacks, same location, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 6 to 8 p.m. Everybody's welcome. Come out tomorrow night for that. And the QR code in the bottom right, the black and white one, become a monthly sponsor for our work in the Sahel region in Africa. We're buying books. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, aprp-intl.org. And finally, the QR code in the upper right is how you can buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8. 100% of the proceeds go towards buying snacks for the event tomorrow night and all the other anti-fascist work and revolutionary organizing work that we do. Forward ever. Enjoy the rest of your evening.